Hey everybody, welcome back to Uncle Pookie's Barbecue. I'm Uncle Pookie, and I just wanted to take a minute to describe a little bit what we're doing here today. I wanted to do a couple of different videos and decided, well, I'm going to try to make this a series, mainly to keep me on track and keep me filming on a regular basis. But what I'd like to do is we're going to do a series of videos, and these first few, hopefully 6 or 7 videos, will be a very simple, easy to do recipes and cook methods that you can use any cooker. The first one that I'm doing now will be on my drum smoker, but it's going to be just a single smoked pork butt, the Boston butt. Not a lot of competition techniques or anything like that, just how do I come out and cook a butt for the family to feed us for a couple of days. You know, just simple recipes. I'm going to not only use my drum smokers. As you can see, I've got a couple of old PKs from the 60s. I've got a Weber kettle grill. I've got a big cabinet smoker, pellet grill smoker. So I want to use some cooking methods, some techniques, and some equipment that anybody and everybody can have. I mean, a Weber kettle you can get, like you can go to a garage sale sometimes and get them for 40 or 50 bucks. So I want to use some simple equipment, some easier techniques that anybody can get started, that has an interest in outdoor grilling and smoking. Anybody can start up with. We'll move on to some more advanced techniques, some more advanced recipes, maybe some stuff that you don't really think about, you don't necessarily find in your local grocery store. Maybe some, you know, just different meats, different techniques. But we're going to advance through a series like that. But to start out, we're going to do some everyday, simple, great food recipes that anybody can start up doing. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. I appreciate all the new subscribers. We finally got over 100 subscribers the other day. Thank y'all very much for that. I really appreciate it. And if you like the video, you like today's video, you like the series idea, please subscribe to the channel. All that does is it lets you know when I do put a new video on YouTube. So please hit that subscribe button, like and share the videos with your friends so that they can do the same thing. And then check me out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and my website is unclepookiesbarbecue.com. So check me out. If you have any questions at all, feel free to contact me through the website. I'll be glad to email or call with you. Anything that I know, I'm by no means an expert, but the few things I've picked up over the years of cooking and competing, I'm more than happy to share, and if I know it, you're going to know it. So thanks again for subscribing, for watching, and stay tuned here. We're about to start the first video in the series is on a simple Boston butt. When we did the podcast with Malcolm from How to BBQ Right, that was what we both agreed is one of the simplest and easiest things to start out when you're just learning how to smoke. And a Boston butt is great. It's an easy meat, it's a large meat, feed a lot of people, and it's very, very forgiving. It's hard to really mess up a Boston butt. So for pulled pork, for sandwiches, nachos, tacos, whatever you want to do. So stay tuned for that. We're going to get started on that, and appreciate again all the support, and y'all have a great time. Just looking to pick out a pork butt and wanted to show you what I look for when I do pick one up. I don't like one like this that's got the vein and the blood on it. All that's going to be cut out, but that's just, if I can find one without, that's that much less work I've got to do on my side. I don't want one with a lot of heavy fat. This one's got some thick fat, but that's easy enough to cut off. Got some good bacon meat there on the bottom. Just like a nice thick fat cap there. If I was looking for competition, this money muscle looks pretty good. Looks like it's a good size. We're looking at just under 10 pounds at 9.3 pounds. So that is the one I'm taking home. Alright, we're going to get home and get to cooking here. Get it trimmed up, get it seasoned up, and ready to go. Alright everybody, you saw that I went to Sam's, my local Sam's, to pick up this butt. It is the exact same, I don't know if you can read that label, but it's the exact same one that I picked out of the store. I liked it because it didn't have a lot of extra stuff at least exposed, you know, the blood vessel, the artery or the vein sticking out, and the blood had been sitting. Sometimes that can just get a little nasty, so I choose to pick a cleaner piece of meat when I'm able to at the store. Now, if you buy them by the case, you kind of get what you get. But if you go into your local supermarket and you pick up a 1 or a 2 pack, you can kind of hand pick which ones you want to cook. So hopefully this one is going to be as clean as it looks through the package. Sometimes you get them opened up and they've got a lot more going on than what you can see. May have a blood vessel under the tag sometimes, and that's not a big deal. It's just one of those things that if I'm sitting there, if I've got the opportunity to pick something out by hand and really look at it before I buy it, I'd rather pick something that looks good and not something that I got to work on when I get home. So everything looks pretty clean, pretty good here. I don't see anything exposed or anything crazy going on. What I do on these simple cooks here is just kind of look over everything. Like right there's a piece where the bone had kind of sheared off from when they were cutting it or packing it with the packer. So I don't want any chance of that kind of stuff to escape and get all the way through to the final product. So I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to pick out any of those loose pieces and get them out of the way. That's just something that happens from time to time. Now, of course, you can wash this off in your sink and clean up any little fine residue pieces, but everything there looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of inspect. There's different muscle groups in a pork butt. The competition teams know this well. This front end here, away from the bone, is what we call the money muscle. This is just a backyard cook. I'm not trying to trim this up for a competition. I'm just trimming this up to mass produce some food. So I'm just going to go through and look at another little piece of bone that was stuck there. I'm just going to look for any kind of cleanup pieces. Again, I've said this before, the more work I do on this end of the cook, the less I have to do when we're all hungry and ready to eat. This has got a really nice fat cap on it. It's not super thick in anywhere. It's none of this really hard fat that doesn't cook away. So there's really not a lot of trimming I have to do on this end. There's just a little bit right here that I'm going to trim down and kind of make it smooth and even. Now, I don't want to get too deep in it because this meat down here between these layers of fat, I lovingly refer to it as butt bacon since this is a pork butt, and this is very similar to bacon that you get down towards the belly. It's a protected piece of meat, protected by all this fat surrounding it, so when it is done cooking, it is going to be the most tender, juicy piece of meat out of this whole pork butt. So I don't want to gouge into it too much and get this out and take too much of this fat off to ruin that, make it dry out and crust over. So I'm just trimming a little bit here. There's a little red spot here. Sometimes there's little bruises or hematomas, anything like that I want to cut out. That I wasn't sure about that, and it doesn't look like that's what that was. So I'm just kind of going through and nitpicking a little bit, but again, just getting off some thicker, looser fat that's not going to be productive in the final product. Now on this top side here, there's not a whole lot going on either. Everything looks really good. There's a little bit of fat here that we can trim back, and again, now this is this loose, more cookable fat. It's going to render away. Now, there's a little bit of meat with that, but that's okay. We're just going to trim that down. None of this is going to be evident in the final product. This loose wiggly fat, it's going to render out and go away. So I'm not too worried about trimming this down real deep. Now some of this on top here that's just loose and it's not really doing anything, it's not going to flavor the meat, it's not going to tenderize anything. And for us that like bark pieces, the more exposed meat you get, the more bark you can create with your seasoning. So I'm just going to come through and cut some of this out. Not a whole lot, but just enough to, like I said, expose some more meat to put seasoning on to make some good bark later on. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. Again, I want this to be a simple cook. If this is my first time cooking on a drum smoker, as I've said in the past, one of the easiest cooks to learn on is one of the easiest meats to cook to learn how to use your smoker is a pork butt. It's very forgiving. It's a great piece of meat. You can feed a lot of people with it. This 9-pound butt, what I like to do to kind of estimate how many people this will feed, and this is purely an estimate, but I've heard some people go with a 1/4 pound per person. So if you had you know, a 9-pound butt, they're thinking you could feed 4 people every pound. 4 times 9 is 28. So I don't know that you could really feed 28 people off of this one butt. I tend to go more towards a 1/2 pound. So you could reasonably feed, once this product is finished cooking, I'm going to say 15 to 18 people. You know, 1/2 pound for a 9-pounder would be 18 people. Again, you got some heavy eaters. You might not get, you know, someone back in my day would probably be able to eat a pound easy on their own. So I'm going to say, you know, 12, 15, 18 people. 18 probably the max that that's going to feed, but 12 to 15 people will be comfortable for this once it's pulled and shredded. So that is all the trimming I'm going to do. This is a really nice looking butt. It's got a lot of intermuscular fat, and that's kind of what you're looking for. It's not this outside fat. You're looking for all these striations of white in the red meat, especially on that money muscle. That's why this is such a good piece of meat for contest. But it's good red pork, which means to me that it was a younger pig. It's got good muscular fat all the way through, so we're ready to season. And you can see here real quick, that is how much waste that I've got off of this 9-pound butt. Not even a 1/2 pound really. So you got a lot of product that's going to be able to be produced off of this. What I like to do, I take my barbecue rub. It's a good sweet rub that has a little hint of heat in the back end, which is great. Now, a lot of people tell you seasoning the fat is kind of like putting makeup on a hog. It just ain't going to do anything. It's here, and there is some muscular, some meat that's coming through some of this fat. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to season the fat in real heavy, but I'm going to put a little bit on here just so I get a good coat all the way around. We're going to season this up. I want, if there is this fat that renders down into the juices of the wrapped, but later on, I want the seasoning to be in that juice. So that is why I'm going to season up the fat end. I'm not going to put it on as heavy as I do the sides and the meat pieces. But I do, like I said, as that fat renders, I want seasoning in that juice that it creates to flavor the meat as it's continuing to cook. So I'm just going to make sure I get a good heavy coat on all sides. This is a big piece of meat, and you're not going to over season it by any means. You can definitely under season it if you're not wanting, you know, I say under season, you're really not going to under season because you're just going to taste more of the pork, but it's going to be a little more bland if you don't put a heavy coat on here. There's a lot of meat for this to cover up, so that's what we're doing here. We're just going to cover all areas, exposed meat pieces, with a good heavy coat. Now you notice I'm not rubbing, when I call this seasoning a rub, I'm not rubbing this into the meat. I'm patting it in. Rubbing is just kind of spreading it around and grinding it in certain spots, and what you have is a heavy spot here and a light spot over here. I'm just patting this in so that it's sticking to the meat. You can use a binder like mustard or olive oil, peanut oil, anything like that. But when it's a big piece of meat like this, and I'm going to let it sit, get up to room temperature for a little while, I've got time before I put it on the cooker to come back and recoat this, which I'm going to do. I'm going to put a light layer on. What this is going to do while it's sitting here coming to room temperature, it's going to sweat. This meat is going to get warmer. The salt that's in my rub is going to draw out some of the moisture and draw it to the surface, and in part draw in some of the seasoning to the meat. So it's going to stick. It's not a situation where we're picking this meat up and it's just all coming right back off. You'll see here in a few minutes that it's going to get moist. It's going to get kind of pasty on the outside, and that's what it's supposed to do. So there's no real need for a binder like mustard or olive oil or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to go get the smoker started up. We're going to let this sit here on the kitchen table for a little bit and, like I said, do its thing, get happy, and we will see you in a few minutes. Stay tuned. You can see that I've got the fire started. My basket has got about 8 pounds of Jealous Devil lump charcoal in it. I've got a couple of applewood chunks embedded in that charcoal, and I've got my lightning nugget fire starting the fire underneath in the ash pan. Again, I like to start my fires from the bottom. Some people put lit charcoal on top. To each their own. I just prefer this way of doing things. I normally don't use a heat diverter when I'm only cooking on the top rack, but since this is a Boston butt and we do have that fat cap, and I like to leave the fat side down in the drum smoker since that's where the heat is coming from, I want to be able to not have every bit of that fat dripping down into my firebox. So that heat diverter grease catch combination, that's going to help maintain my constant temperature. So we're going to get this thing loaded up here in just a minute, and I'll dial back in here in just a minute when we get ready to put the meat on, and we'll be ready to go. Stay tuned. I've just got the drum closed up. I got my ThermalWorks dot thermometer in there on the grate level near where I'm going to put the butt on the grate, and you can see we're steady climbing. We're at 119 now, and just wanted to take a second to explain, I do sell these drums with a dial thermometer where I'm running that pit probe through right above the intake, and the dials are great. Again, if you've seen any of my videos or the podcast with Malcolm here a couple weeks ago, I personally don't care for a dial thermometer right there in the wall, because all it's doing is telling me what the temperature is right there at the wall. Now there's not a lot of variance between that and the cooking grate, but I'll show you here where I've got that thermometer right there. I'm going to have the butt in the center of that cooking grate, so my temperature is going to be where I'm cooking, and to me that's more important. It's not vital. This is just a backyard cook, so if I know at the wall it's sitting steady at 250, that's perfectly fine. That's going to be all I need to know. And I know from cooking on these drums so many times, I normally don't run a thermometer. I know that when I close this damper down to a little more than halfway, I'm going to have maybe a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch opening there, and the exhaust is where I'm going to do most of my temperature adjustment, but I'll probably close it off to about that, and then it's going to sit around 250, so we're going to be just fine. One of the things I did want to discuss real quick, I want to give a shout out to the Jealous Devil charcoal. I spoke on this before, and I do like using the lump charcoal, but the briquettes work perfectly fine. The biggest difference between your lump and your briquette in this smoker, or smoker similar to it where the air is very, very controlled, you've got a lot of ash and a lot of fillers in a briquette to make it hold that shape. So you have a lot more cleanup after it is done. And two, if, like I said, I've got about 8 or 10 pounds of lump charcoal in this cooker right now. When this cook is over, I'm going to have leftover charcoal with very little ash on the leftover pieces. I can basically shake that basket just a little bit and then reuse what's left over. Most of the time with briquettes, you don't have that opportunity. You may have a few pieces. You may have a few pieces that are able to start up again and reuse, but they're going to have a lot of ash on them, and in the cooking process and the heat, a lot of those binders will break down, and the leftover briquettes will break down. So you just have a lot more leftover with a good quality lump charcoal like this versus using briquettes, whether it be, you know, the Kingsford brand, the Royal Oak brand, any of the brands like that. Briquettes, you have to have binders of some kind, and that charcoal just breaks down so much looser as it's cooking that you just don't have a lot of leftovers, and again, you're going to have more ash to clean out. So these drum smokers will work perfectly fine with briquettes. Nothing wrong with using them at all. It's just I prefer the lump because of the cleanup and the being able to reuse what's left over. And again, the good people at Jealous Devil help me out, supply me with charcoal. So I really appreciate them and what they do for me. But they really are a great product. If you're looking to spend a little more money on a premium charcoal, Jealous Devil is definitely one you want to check out. It is a good product. It's very, very clean burning. No extra smoke. You see just a little bit of smoke coming through there right now. Well, that's my wood getting started. Where I placed my first chunk. I want to make sure when I put this butt on here in just a few minutes that it's going to have good clean smoke coming out of it, and I'm not getting hardly any smoke out of the charcoal itself. This is all wood. So again, a great product. They've treated me well, and I appreciate them, and ask you if you're looking to step up your game a little bit with the charcoal that you use. Definitely you want to give them a try, see for yourself how good that product is. Just put the pork butt directly on the center of that top rack. As you can see, scooted the temperature probe over just a little bit, and you can see through that possibly that the charcoal is burning well. The pork butt is directly over that heat deflector and grease catch, so we're not going to have a whole lot of direct grease dripping straight into the fire. So this is a pristine little setup here. I think everything's a go. I'm going to go ahead and get this lid on before that fire gets out of control, and I'm going to temper it back, like I said, about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch open. I'm going to do the same thing on the air intake. I'm going to give it a few minutes to stabilize here, as we were just under 200 degrees when I took the lid off a minute ago. But everything is set to go. I am going to leave this, I'm going to check it in about 2 hours, and I'll periodically check on the temperature just to make sure there's no erratic temperature spikes or anything, which there normally is not. But I'm going to check it in about 2 hours, make sure our color's looking good, because that's really what we're cooking to right now while the butt is unwrapped and open smoke time is going. I like to cook it to the temperature I want it to finish up, or the color that I want it to finish up at. I'm not too worried about the internal temperature until after it's wrapped and I'm finishing it up. So we're going to go ahead and let this joker do its deal. You can see real quick that the temperature is at 233, 234. So it has definitely slowed down its climb. And I'm just going to keep an eye on it here for the next few minutes, make sure it stabilizes around 250, 240, 250, 260. That's where I want to see the temperature sit for the rest of this cook while it's open. The butt is unwrapped on the smoker. gotten as much bark as I want it to get right now. This camera is not really going to get a good shot of it, but it's just as dark as I want it to be. So what I'm about to do is take this butt, put it in a aluminum half pan. You could also double wrap it in foil once, and then kind of twist it and wrap it again in another direction. Either way is perfectly fine, but when you wrap it in a pan, you hold more of the juices. They're not able to escape from the double wrap of foil. So I'm wanting to save those juices this particular time. So I'm going to do that. Basically, just the butt is in a half pan, wrapped tightly with thick, heavy-duty foil. And I'm going to put this back on, leave this on the smoker now. We're going to continue to cook at about 250 until the internal temperature of the pork is around 195 to 200 degrees. The reason I say around 195 to 200 is basically you just want it to be able to pull apart. You want the bone to come out cleanly, and that's normally what temperature we're at when that happens. I've got other probes, meat probes and thermometers, where I could stick a probe in the meat and just watch the temperature. We're going to do this simple. I'm going to leave this on and check it after about 2 hours. I'm going to open up the foil and tug on the bone and see what happens. It's going to go through a stall. Right now the internal temperature is somewhere around 150, 160 degrees. At about 170 to 180, the meat is basically trying to cool off. It is sweating out any juice, any fat, anything, just like our own bodies do. It's going to do everything it can to stay cooler than 200 degrees, basically. So the wrapping in a foil surrounds it with its own juices to keep it from drying out, but it also speeds up that cooking process, that stall that we're going to hit. So what we're going to do is sweat it out, let it go, and like I said, just going to check it manually every hour or so. After about 2 hours, then we're going to check it about after another hour, and then probably every 30 minutes after that. So, well, welcome back, guys. Give you a little rundown of what we've had go on today. Basically, this morning, you saw me go and pick out a pork butt from my local Sam's. So this is not a high-end cook. I didn't go to my butcher and have some Duroc hog shoulder picked out here. This is from my local Sam's, local grocery store, anywhere you can grab a butt at a really cheap price. I mean, this was like $15 for this butt. So really, I'm going to be able to feed 12 to 15 people with this piece of meat. We did a light trim, as you can see from earlier. Maybe trimmed not even half a pound off of this butt as it came out of the package. Seasoned it up, put a heavy coat of my barbecue love on this piece of meat, because it is such a big piece of meat. It's going to take all that seasoning really well. Once we pull this, and I'll show you how tender it is, but once we pull it, all that seasoning that's been on and created a bark, it's been on the outside, it's all going to mix in with the good meat inside. As we tear this down, it's really going to be a good flavor to that. I put it on my smoker for actually 5 hours. Normally I go about 4, but I wanted a little bit more bark on this one because I knew I was going to have it in the pan. It was going to be surrounded by its own juices. I left it on for 5 hours, running about 250 to 260 degrees on the smoker. Didn't have to, didn't baste it, didn't spritz it, didn't mop it, didn't do anything, just let it go. Once I hit that 5 hour mark, it hit the color that I wanted to see. Didn't even check the temperature because it really doesn't matter. It was as dark as I wanted it to get. I put it in one of these half pans. You can get these steam pans at Walmart, Kroger, any of your local grocery stores. You can get the heavy-duty aluminum foil and double wrap them. You can get a stretch of foil going long ways, wrap the butt up, and then run one the other way and wrap it up so that you get all your seams double covered, you would have a very light chance of leaking any of the juice that you'll see in this pan. But because I'm pulling this meat and separating it, and then I'm basically giving it to some friends of mine for them to eat on, I wanted to be able to have it in the pan so that basically I can refrigerate it, cool it down, deliver it to them, and they can either freeze it like it is, or they can bag it up into smaller portions, whatever they choose to do, or they can just simply, when I take it to them, it's going to be in this pan with another piece of aluminum foil over it. They can take it straight on back to the oven, warm it back up, and in about an hour it's ready to go. So you got a lot of different choices if you want to do it this way. But I cooked it in the pan under the foil, tightly wrapped, for another 4 hours. So it did take a full 9 hours to get this to hit 200 degrees internal temperature. And you'll see why I wanted to do that in just a minute. But basically 5 hours of open cooking with the applewood smoke. The Jealous Devil charcoal ran flawless, no voids, no issues with temperature variations or anything like that. Wrapped it up in the pan, put the aluminum foil over it real tight so the air would not seep out, no steam would seep out, anything like that, for another 4 hours, for a total of a 9-hour cook. And this is our finished product right here. Super juicy, a lot of moisture in this. You can see in this pan, it actually leaked out a little bit as I was transporting it to the table. Super moisture content here, and as we always talk about, you want to be able to pull this bone clean as the steam rises. I do say that is a clean bone, no problem there at all this juice and meat here. I mean, there's not really, you can't really call this pulling when it's just crumbling and falling apart. So you've got all this juice down in here to keep everything moist, and I mean, it's just crumbling apart. You've got some great smoke penetration. This meat on top and around the edges is nice and pink. Down inside here, as you get down into the heart of it, is just, I mean, it's just as tender as it could be. Whew, and it's still warm. I've got cotton glove liners on underneath my nitrile gloves, and it's scalding hot right now. We just took it out of the smoker a little while ago. And if it ever cools off, I'm gonna try a little bit. Wow, that's really good stuff there. As you can see, I mean, it's just pull apart, tender, falling off the bone. Bone comes out clean. I gotta get me a little of this bark here. This is the bark. This is what they talk about when the seasoning and the smoke all adheres to the outside portions of meat here. Wow. It's a little after 9 o'clock here. We left the smoker alone while we could go eat dinner with some friends. I'd just about sit here and start eating dinner all over again for this, I tell you. But anyway, if you're new to smoking, and this doesn't have to be cooked on a drum smoker, any kind of smoker you've got, if you've got a pellet smoker, if you have an offset, if you have a Weber kettle, this can be done on any kind of cooker, as long as there's an indirect way to have your meat not directly over the fire, real close to the fire. Man, that's good. Any kind of indirect and controllable heat source, so that your fire is not getting up 300, 350, 400 degrees or hotter, like in a grilling situation. You can cook at, at a higher temperature instead of 250. You can cook these at 300 or 350. but you do just have to kind of keep an eye on the bark. You don't want your product to get too dark when you get to those higher temperatures, but I like to cook this at around 250 degrees. Again, 4 to 5 hours, depending on what color you're wanting. I like this dark red mahogany color, they call that. Turns out great. So if you're new to low and slow or a lower temp smoking or cooking, get you a butt, follow my instructions there, and you will be pleasantly surprised. Again, moist, tender, smoky. The apple wood does not load it up with smoke. Sometimes some of the harsher woods like hickory, you put too much hickory in your firebox, can be a little overpowering. But anyway, still, y'all go get you a 8 to 10 pound pork butt. Cook it, wrap it up, cook it till it's done. Clean bone comes out like that. You didn't even have to twist it or anything. You know it's done. And like I said, you'll be able to feed the family for a couple of nights and enjoy. Get out, try it, and that's the good thing about it. You make mistakes, you learn from them, you go again. So thank you for tuning in, and y'all have a good evening.